Welcome in. Today we're going to tackle the 3,000-year history of Israel, but from a really different angle. We're looking at it through this idea of creativity, born from constraint. It's a story where, as you'll see, everything, art, identity, even survival, was really forged in the fires of exile.
Yeah, this quote, it really nails the theme for today. The history of the Jewish people and eventually the state of Israel, it's not just a dry timeline of dates and events, right? Think of it more like this epic 3,000-year story, a story about a people who were constantly forced to come up with new ways to survive, to thrive, to just be. And they did it because of the limitations they faced. And the biggest limitation of all? Exile. Okay, so to really get this story, we've got to go way, way back, right back to the beginning. We're talking about the establishment of the original homeland and that first massive, catastrophic moment of displacement that pretty much set the stage for everything that followed.
What you're looking at here is this really interesting push and pull, A story of permanence and, at the same time, total vulnerability. On one hand, you've got the name Israel showing up in the historical record over 3,000 years ago. Then you get the kingdoms of Israel and Judah popping up as actual powers in the region. They're there, they're real. But all of that rootedness just gets shattered in 586 BCE. That's when the Babylonians roll in, destroy the first temple in Jerusalem, and drag the leadership into exile. This moment changes everything.
And in Jewish thought, this wasn't just about losing a battle or some territory. It was way deeper than that. This event kicked off what's known as galut, or exile. And this is a really profound spiritual idea. It's not just about being physically away from home. It's this state of being where that direct line to God, which was centered in the temple, well, it's now blocked. It's constrained. That is the ultimate limitation to have to work with.
And this is where our whole theme just clicks into place, right? Faced with this massive constraint, losing all their central institutions, the Jewish people didn't disappear. No way. They innovated. The one big temple, okay, that's gone. So they created synagogues, which could be anywhere. The animal sacrifices, that's out. So they developed formalized prayer. The old priesthood based on bloodlines, that was replaced by rabbinic leadership based on knowledge. What they did essentially was create a portable Judaism, an identity that didn't need a state to survive.
And that creativity, that resilience, man, it was going to be tested for nearly 2,000 years because the next huge catastrophe was just around the corner, the Roman destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE. And that's what really kicked off the global diaspora. So for the next 1,900 years, the land of Israel was just constantly changing hands. Look at this list of empires that ruled it. Romans, Byzantines, Umayyads, Crusaders, Mamluks, Ottomans, the British, it just goes on and on. It shows you just how unstable the place was. And all that turmoil meant that if you were a Jewish community, whether you were living there or somewhere else, you just couldn't rely on anyone else for security. There was no stability.
So the big question is, how did they hold it all together? How did they maintain a single identity through all that chaos? Well, they relied on those internal structures they'd built. Rabbinic Judaism gave them a set of rules and a spiritual framework they could take anywhere. The Talmud, this massive body of work all written down in exile, it basically became their intellectual homeland. And maybe most importantly, there was this powerful, persistent dream of one day returning. That shared hope for the future kept them connected.
And that dream, that hope of returning, it didn't stay just a dream forever. Eventually, it started to take on a new shape. After centuries of just praying for it, the late 1800s saw the birth of a political movement, something designed to take that ancient hope and make it a modern reality. And that movement was Zionism.
And the rise of modern Zionism? It was a direct response to, you guessed it, another set of constraints, the terrible conditions for Jews in Europe. They were facing violent pogroms, rising anti-Semitism. It was brutal. So thinkers like Leon Pinsker came along and said, look, the only way out is for us to free ourselves. We need our own homeland. Then a guy named Theodor Herzl came along and drew up the political roadmap. And by 1897, it was official. The first Zionist Congress stood up and told the world what their goal was.
This quote, wow, it's from Chaim Weizmann, who would later become Israel's president. And get this, he said this in 1936, a decade before the full horror of the Holocaust was known. It is absolutely chilling. It just perfectly captures the desperation that was fueling this whole movement. This wasn't some abstract political theory. For millions of people, it felt like the only way out of a completely impossible situation.
And that desperation, it would hit its absolute peak during and right after World War II. This is what set the stage for the incredibly dramatic and chaotic rebirth of a Jewish state. The Holocaust just completely devastated the Jewish communities of Europe. 6 million people gone. And for the survivors who were stuck in these displaced persons camps, going back to their old homes it was unthinkable for most of them. And this number here is staggering. Over 95% of them saw their future in only one place, the ancient homeland in Palestine. The call for a state wasn't just a political goal anymore. It was an urgent, desperate cry for survival.
So, everything comes to a head on November 29, 1947. The newly formed United Nations is trying to figure out what to do with British-ruled Palestine, and they pass Resolution 181. The recommendation? To partition the land, to split it into two independent states, one Arab, one Jewish. The reaction to the UN vote was immediate and intense. Joy in Jewish communities, anger and rejection in Arab communities. A civil war broke out almost instantly, and things just escalated so fast. The British pull out. On May 14, 1948, David Ben-Gurion declares the State of Israel is born. And the very next day, the armies of 5 neighboring Arab countries invade. The new nation was literally born fighting for its life.
So creating this state, it was the climax of this 2,000-year-old dream. An incredible moment. But, and this is a big but, the end of Exile wasn't the end of the story. It brought a whole new set of incredibly complex challenges that are still shaping Israel today. One of the most amazing stories since 1948 is this massive ingathering of the exiles. Just look at these numbers. They show this incredible shift. In 1950, just a couple years after its founding, only 6% of all the Jews in the world lived in Israel. Flash forward to 2020, and that number is up to almost half. Israel went from a tiny community to the largest single center of Jewish life on earth, and it happened fast.
But since day one, statehood has really been defined by these two competing forces, conflict and the search for peace. It's like two sides of the same coin. The decades after 1948 saw huge transformative wars, like the Six-Day War in 1967, but those same decades also brought historic peace treaties with countries like Egypt and Jordan, and major attempts at peace, like the Oslo Accords with the Palestinians. And that constant tension, that pull between conflict and the hope for peace, that really is the central story of modern Israel.
And that brings us right back to where we started. For thousands of years, the biggest constraint was galut, exile. And that pressure created incredible spiritual and cultural art, really. But now, the challenge is totally flipped. It's not about how to survive without home anymore. It's about navigating the incredible complexities of having one. So the question I want to leave you with is this. If exile sparks a certain kind of creativity, what new art, what new ideas are being born from the very different, very complex challenges of homecoming?